Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. Friday night, February 18th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and hopefully I'm streaming properly and you can hear me. Chat room is open, and I did pop the link into there, what we were talking about earlier this week, Wednesday night and Monday night. It's an article to do with dysfunctional families, and I just find it very interesting to look at this stuff because I grew up in a dysfunctional family, and our family never did get out of its dysfunction. And so, I find this very helpful for myself, so I hope other people will get something out of it too. And, the reason I think it's so important is because dysfunctional families, there may be abuse within a dysfunctional family and there may not be. And but it is sort of a breeding ground for abuse. So I know growing up in a dysfunctional family, there was a whole lot of abuse. So not only was it dysfunctional, but it was abusive in every way. And so, but some dysfunctional families are not necessarily abusive; they're just dysfunctional. But it's good information because I know a lot of people suffer with this and have grown up in a dysfunctional family, and it's a hard way to grow up. And so, then we have to try to figure all this stuff out later and try to, learn how to set these boundaries, how to cope, and everything else. So that's why I'm talking about this tonight, because it really does. A lot of children who are growing up in dysfunction. So I'm, everybody has to listen at your own discretion. I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, as I say on every show, just in case somebody's listening for the first time. And I just think, everybody should know, I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a very sensitive topic. So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, and you have to be aware that, these types of topics are very sensitive, and that, they bother most people. Some people, they don't, some people can listen to this stuff no problem, and other people may find it hard to listen to. So especially survivors who are just starting out on their healing journey, right? So you have to know what's comfortable for you to listen to, and if you think the topics of abuse might bother you, then you need to turn the show off, right? It is clearly your discretion. So you have to listen at your own discretion. You are responsible for what you listen to. And young people under the age of 18, you have to have permission to listen to my show. Mainly I say that because I believe in protecting children at all times, and that's why I care about children. I care about kids. And I think that you have the right to be protected at all times. You need to learn how to keep yourself safe and have permission to listen to my shows. Get an adult, somebody who's older, a parent, caregiver. Hopefully you have one that cares about you. I know how it is to have one that doesn't care about you. I know how it is to grow up with parents who don't care. So, if you don't have a parent who cares, maybe you have a teacher, mentor, somebody, who's an adult who has a good head on their shoulders, and they can listen to the show with you and help you decide whether you should be listening, right? And because age appropriately, right? I mean, I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my show. So thanks very much, everybody. And we'll get right into this show here tonight, talking about dysfunctional families. This is a kind of a lengthy article here. This is from Mudrashram. It's from www.mudrashram.com, and I'll just give you the title again. This is Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies. It says, when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, it's written by George A. Boyd, 1992. So it's old information, but it doesn't matter because it's all sort of, there's no stats or that. It's all information compiled by, people who do study the issues of people who have grown up in dysfunctional families and their findings, right? And this stuff, if you check out John Bradshaw's books, John Bradshaw writes a whole lot about the roles that people play within dysfunctional families, and so does this particular article here from www.mudrashram.com, talking about dysfunctional family roles and, what it's like for children to grow up in a dysfunctional family. Goes on to talk about the different roles, and also what we were talking about last night, types of dysfunctional families. There's 4 main types, they said, that are breeding grounds for codependency, and they list them off. Number 1 being the alcoholic or chemically dependent family system. Number 2, the emotionally or psychologically disturbed family system. Number 3, the physically or sexually abusing family system. And number 4, the religious fundamentalist or rigidly dogmatic family system. And so they talk about patterns of codependency, And they said these family systems discourage healthy communication of issues and feelings between themselves, destroy the family members' ability to trust themselves and to trust another in an intimate relationship, and they freeze family members into unnatural roles, making constructive change difficult. They said rules that encourage the unnatural patterns of relating in these codependent family systems are rules might be within the home, like don't talk about problems, right? Don't express feelings openly or honestly. Communicate indirectly through acting out or sulking or via another family member. Have unrealistic expectations about what the dependent will do for you. Another unhealthy rule that might be happening within the home is don't be selfish, think of the other person first. Don't take your parents as an example, like do as I say, not as I do. Don't have fun. Don't rock the boat, keep the status quo. That happens in a lot of families. Don't rock the boat, don't say anything, talk about the issues, right? Don't talk about sex, and don't challenge your partner's religious beliefs or these family rules. And then they go on to talk about the dysfunctional family dynamics engendered by these unrealistic and restrictive rules. They said leads to unfulfilling relationships as adults. And so we were kind of going through those on last Wednesday, talking about what Dr. Kazir believes to be the symptomatic characteristics of codependency in adult relationship styles, marked by, and there's like so many of them. There's 17, and but they're very important to go over. One is difficulty in accurately identifying and expressing feelings. Number 2, problems in forming and maintaining close, intimate relationships. Number 3, higher than normal prevalence of marrying a person from another dysfunctional family or a person with active alcoholism or addiction. Number 4, perfectionism, having unrealistic expectation of self and others and being too hard on oneself. Number 5, rigidity in behavior and attitudes, having an unwillingness to change. Number 6, having a resistance to adapting to change and fearful of taking risks. 7, feeling over-identified or responsible for others' feelings or behavior. And kind of even maybe taking on some of that stuff. Like I know as a child growing up in my home, whatever mood my mom was in, that's what I took on, because I was always looking to be on her side to avoid abuse, right? So if she was down, I'd have to go and console her and take on her feelings and take on what she was going through in order to get into her head so that I could try to avoid the abuse, right? So in doing so, it's sort of, I don't know, it's kind of hard when you do that, because it's hard to not do that as an adult if you did that as a child. And I did that also with my dad, because my dad was crazy and psychologically ill, and I shouldn't say crazy, but he was acting crazy. He was, and he still is, schizophrenic, right? Borderline schizophrenic, but I'd say more schizophrenic than anything. And also, had a lot of borderline personality issues and other things. And he, the crazier you were in my home, and the crazier you acted, and the more bizarre the behavior was, the more normal it was. So all the siblings all took on these strange ways of behaving, and it is because our parents promoted that. That's how our parents created these roles for us. They set them up, and we were just expected to play them out. And so it's kind of hard to go from that and then try to go into society and into your normal day at school, or dealing with other people and not behave that way, the same way you're behaving in your home, because quite often other people, like friends of mine's parents, kind of looked at me as if I was a little strange. My behaviors were strange. They knew something was wrong. Some of them actually knew about the abuse because they lived on the same block and they knew what was going on over there. But it's sad. It's really unfortunate when kids have to take this stuff on just to be able to survive within the home. And I have my good friend here, Gypsy Witch, from Australia. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it, and it's always nice to have you here with me. Hanging out with me, and I appreciate it. So another one is number 8, having a constant need for approval and attention from others to feel good about themselves. Number 9, awkwardness in making decisions, feel terrified of making mistakes and may defer decision making to others. This is stuff that can happen to people, growing up in these codependent, dysfunctional homes. People might be afraid to make decisions and might be afraid to make mistakes, right? Number 10, feeling powerless and ineffective, like whatever they do does not make a difference. Number 11, exaggerated feelings of shame, worthlessness, and low self-esteem. Number 12, avoiding conflict at any price and will often repress their own feelings and opinions to keep the peace. Number 13, apprehension over abandonment by others. 14, acting belligerently and aggressively to keep others at a distance. I was talking about that on my show actually this morning, that I sort of took on the bully role outside the home, not within the home, because growing up in my home, I was the youngest child and I was the last born, and I had no power there. You know what I mean? I was the one who was being abused and was being manipulated and abused in every way, and so I couldn't be the bully in my home. But as soon as I got out the front door and was out on the street or at school or wherever I was outside of my home, I took on a role in order to protect myself, to keep people at a distance. I took on the aggressive role, and kind of like a bully type. You know what I mean? People stayed away from me. Even my own peers, a lot of people who didn't know me that well, like kids that I grew up around, some of them kind of stayed away from me because of my behaviors, and then others kind of could see through it and sort of, got to know me a little more personally and closer, and realized that I wasn't really like that with them, but that was just my appearance, and that was just a protective measure, right? Tendencies to be impatient and over-controlling, that's another issue. Failure to properly take care of themselves because of their absorption in the needs and concerns of other people, and martyrs living for others instead of for oneself. This can happen within these codependent families, right? Dread of the expression of their own anger and will do anything to avoid provoking another person. The particular expression of these codependent traits by each individual is often a function of the type of family in which a child grows up. I know myself, as far as expressing my own anger, I had a lot of problems with that because when I was younger, obviously, I didn't mind expressing some of it outwardly, not really within my own family, but outside of the home. But when I got older, I thought, well, I want to be able to keep jobs, and I don't want to hurt, so I just repressed all that anger, and I thought, man, if that ever gets loose, who knows what I'll do. Because, it became rage. It was no longer anger. It was just a shame-based rage that manifested inside of me. And I thought, man, if that ever gets out, I don't know if I'll ever be able to come back from that. Certainly don't want to hurt anybody, but I was mainly looking to self-sabotage all the time and to self-injure and to commit suicide, right? So it was destroying me is what it was doing. But I thought, well, better me than somebody else, because I certainly didn't want to make anybody else pay for what I went through as a child, right? And so that's what happens to a lot of people. They don't know how to express their own anger, and so, they're afraid of what might happen, you know what I mean? And so quite often stuff that anger because they don't know how to properly deal with it. If they don't get help, like myself, didn't get any help, and so 4 years I actually had to start working through this stuff. And 4 years ago is when I actually began my healing journey. But it's incredibly damaging and so hard on people, and that's why we have to stop child abuse, right? And we have to really promote healthy relationships within families, and if you're a parent out there and your home is unstable and dysfunctional and a lot of codependent behaviors and substance abuse, alcoholism and whatnot, you really have to get your children some help, and you have to get yourself some help, right? My parents, I blame my parents. I don't blame anybody else for this stuff. My parents were responsible for this. They should have gotten help, and they chose not to. They made an outright choice because they were ordered by the courts to get help and get counseling for themselves and for the children. And we went to 2 sessions, and that was it. So, they chose not to get help. And that's incredibly wrong. And people, you need to realize that you should have a stable, loving and stable and decent of a home life for your children, right? And if you can't do that, then you need to get help, right? That's just the way it is. For example, they said here, Dr. Janet G. Woititz, Woititz, recognizes the following 13 traits that are characteristic of adults who grew up in a family where alcoholism was present. Adult children of alcoholics, and they say here, this is what can happen here, guess at what normal behavior is. That's number 1. Number 2, have difficulty in following a project through from beginning to end, lie when it would be just as easy to tell the truth, judge themselves without mercy, have difficulty having fun, take themselves very seriously, have difficulty with intimate relationships, overact changes over which they have no control, constantly seek approval and affirmation, usually feel they are different than other people, are super responsible or super irresponsible, either way, are extremely loyal even in the face of evidence of that loyalty is undeserved, are impulsive and tend to lock themselves into a course of action without giving serious consideration to alternative behaviors or possible consequences. And they said in authoritarian families whose members may be subjected to inflexible religious values or a black and white one-dimensional view of the universe by a dominant parent, Dr. Janet Kizier believes may be subject to the following problems. They suffer from a frozen identity state dominated by oppressively strict moral values. Their feelings become cut off from beliefs, and they no longer are certain what they really feel. The members experience great difficulty in thinking and deciding for themselves as dogma or parental authority overshadows free choice and independent thinking. They have discomfort sharing honestly about their past, as they believe they must continually pretend they are living up to the ideal held up to them by their authoritarian parents. And they said children who grew up in families where they were victims of incest show a variety of psychological, behavioral, and interpersonal issues, and well, it's no wonder, Psychologically, they suffer from sleep and eating disorders, fears and phobias, recurring nightmares, dissociative reactions, depression, anxiety, and hysterical reactions, have low self-esteem, believe they are polluted or inferior, and feel intense guilt, fear, shame, and anger. And that wouldn't be every single person ever experienced incest or child sexual abuse. This is all just based on what the majority, These things don't affect everybody the same way, and that's the whole issue. Like when you actually get out there and study this stuff, not everyone will have gone through the same degree of abuse. Not everyone will have experienced the same things because all of our experiences are different. Even though there may be a whole group of people that say, yes, I was sexually abused as a child, each one of those situations would be different within that home or within the context of the abuse. And so, and then there's this whole idea of resilience. Some people have more resilience, more ability to bounce back, more hope, more the ability to recover, the ability to think differently about things or whatever gives them that strength within to be able to have a better time getting over this kind of stuff, and others really can't do it. And you know what? There's no shame in that. It's the fact that everybody's different, and we all take different. It takes different amounts of time, and working differently. All of us have to find what works for us in order to heal from this stuff, right? So just because somebody else seems to be maybe healing a little faster than somebody else doesn't mean there's the shame on the other person that's not healing as fast, because we're all different, right? And we all experience different things, and we're all different people, and we need different things, right? So can't compare ourselves in that manner, right? But these are just some things that can happen, right? I know that I didn't sleep well in my home because I was talking about that on some shows actually just recently, because there was a lot of violence, especially at nighttime, because my dad was always trying to force himself on my mother. And so that's when the fights generally would break out in the middle of the night. And my brothers would have to get up and try to protect my mom. And then my dad would be beating on my brothers. And, of course, we'd all be waking up. The rest of the house would be waking up. We never really slept that well. Not only that, but my dad was quite often having psychotic episodes where he would walk around saying that he would kill the family that night in their sleep. So, I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to sleep tonight because just in case my dad comes and try to kill me, I don't want to fall asleep, right? And that's just, this type of stuff is very hard on a person, because especially a young child, because then the next day you got to go to school generally, unless it's the weekend. And but most of our family stuff happened on starting Sunday night, and that's because my dad would go to church on Sunday, and then there would be a big war on Sunday in my home between my mom and my dad that would spill over to the kids, and then Sunday night would be just a miserable mess. And then my dad would be saying, oh, I'll just kill us all because we're all heathen and we're all from the devil, and God would be so pleased if I just killed us all. This is what my dad would say Sunday night, because after brooding over the whole fact that he had this family that was all from the devil, that he should kill them because he was psychotic, right? And so Monday morning was just always a mess, So Sundays were very, very hard in my home. And starting out the week Monday morning with this craziness that had just been going on the day before, was always hard. And this was just a regular occurrence at my house. Like, this is how I grew up. So this is how we all grew up. I was the last of 7 children. There were 5 children in the home when I was born, so the other 2 had already moved out because they moved out as quick as they could to get out of the abuse, right? So the oldest siblings. So there was 5 of us in the home when I was born, and 2 parents. So that's 7 people in the home. And it was absolutely insane. They said another issue with children who have, were victims of incest, they might have behavioral consequences include school problems, truancy, delinquency, running away from their families, prostitution, promiscuity, and higher rates of suicide, completed suicides. And that's just from information that they compile. Some, not every child who was sexually abused or in an incestuous situation in their home would go on to run away or to be promiscuous or to commit suicide, but some do, and that's the sad part. Interpersonally, they have difficulty trusting others, and they are more likely to physically or sexually abuse their own children, and are more likely to be sexually victimized. And that's they always say this stuff, but actually, a lot of people, I don't know. I just know so many survivors who have been abused as children who did not abuse their children, right? Because they knew, what it was like for them to suffer in their own homes. And so they said there's no way they were going to let that happen to their children. So I know a whole lot of survivors who broke the cycle, which is great. I'd like to think that I broke the cycle. I didn't have any children because I lost my baby halfway through the pregnancy, but sadly enough, and didn't have any more children. But I would like to think that I would have broke the cycle. But some people don't. My mom didn't break the cycle. She was abused as a child, and she was highly abusive toward me and everybody else in the home. My dad didn't break the cycle. And so you see some people do go on to abuse their children, which is very sad. They said some adults experience difficulties with adult sexual adjustment, and nearly half show decreased sexual drive after childhood sexual abuse. Well, I know myself. I'll just be honest here since I'm all about being honest. I was abused sexually as a child and by a sibling. And the thing is I was so mortified really by my own body and by, my own body because of what it meant, to be a girl, to be a prepubescent, young girl. Didn't like the fact that my body was growing into this, maturing. And so I had a real hard time with my body. I hated my body. And I had a real hard time with my sexuality. So I didn't, I had crushes on boys. I always was, liked men, like not men, but boys. Had crushes on these boys, but would never, ever have been able to, allow myself to even think about allowing someone to get close to me my whole life until I got older, and because of the issues of the child sexual abuse. And so I was almost non-sexual, you know what I mean? Like I was, I wasn't trying to be a guy, you know what I mean? I'm trying to be a woman. I was just trying to be a no-sex person, right? And that was for protection. And I also witnessed my dad rape my mother at the age of 5 in front of me, and things like this, a lot of sexual abuse in the home, as well as being sexually abused by a sibling. So I had a lot of problems with sexuality, with sex, with the whole thing. So, it did affect me, and, if people would say, does it still affect you? Absolutely. I still have a lot of problems with that, and, can a person ever get over it? I don't know. I would like to think so. I have a lot of hope, and I have a lot of, that's just the word, hope. I believe that people can overcome so much, right, with the right help and with the right amount of time and the right situation, you know what I mean? But, it's incredibly hard on people, absolutely horrific what this does to people. And I don't trust people. I really don't trust men especially. And but I have had 2 pretty decent relationships, and the one that I'm in right now is the best thing that ever happened to me with my sweetheart, who's I've been with for 16 years now. And he's terminally ill, so we no longer live together. But he's been a wonderful person in my life because I knew I could trust him. You know what I mean? So he did help me a lot in that respect, in that regards, as far as my own sexuality and whatnot. But it's so incredibly hard on people what this stuff does. I had a friend who was sexually abused as a child, and she went the other way. She was very promiscuous and wanted to be in the sex industry, really. She was a nymphomaniac, and she was a self-professed, she would say that she was a nymphomaniac. And she was sexually abused as a child as well. So see, there's 2 people, two girls abused as children sexually, and one went one way, the other one went the other way, and she was my best friend. So that just tells you, it can, these things happen to people, and they don't always go the same way. It just depends on the situation, right? So absolutely horrific. They said, so intense are some of the reactions to growing up in these families that Dr. Tim L. Cermak believes they are similar to post-traumatic stress disorder experienced by survivors of disaster or wars such as Vietnam veterans. These happen to people who chronically live through or with events outside of the range of what is considered normal human experience. Well, I remember growing up in that home, and I remember some of the stuff that would be happening, and I thought for sure that I was going insane as a small child. I thought for sure that my mind was not going to be able to cope, especially with the child sexual abuse, with some of the horrific beatings that my mom had dished out to me, some of the horrible things I'd seen my dad do to my mother and to my brothers. I was kind of thinking that my mind was not going to be able to cope and was not going to be able to handle that stuff. You know what I mean? And even other events in the home that really freaked me out. There was a couple of things that happened. One time I think I was 5 years old, just turning 5, and this mirror, this big, huge, heavy mirror, was right above my mom on the wall. And I mean, it was heavy, big old heavy mirror with a big frame on it. It fell off the wall while she was talking on the phone. She was sitting in this chair at this table right below it, and it fell on her head, and it busted into a bunch of shards of glass, and because it was a heavy-duty mirror, and the shards all went and stuck into my mom's legs, and blood was like pouring out all over, spurting out all over the living room. Well, she was on the phone, thank God, with the neighbor, and the neighbor heard the commotion and called an ambulance, and so the ambulance came right away, obviously, right? But this was the kind of stuff that was happening, as well as the abuse and the violence and the craziness. That there was quite often that I was kind of thinking my mind would never be able to recover from that. And then I started doing a lot of drugs at the age of 12 years old and all the way through to the age of 21, hallucinogens and all kinds of stuff like that, because I felt like my mind was already crazy. So it didn't matter to me if, I actually liked the idea of escaping and getting away and going somewhere else and for a little while, as long as the drugs lasted. And so I was a drug addict until the age of 21. Finally got off the drugs and then started to really straighten out my life. Went and lived in the Grand Canyon for a while. Really got away from things, got away from the city that I was living in, got into the wilderness of the Grand Canyon area for a year, and did a whole lot of thinking. Walked in the woods, did a whole lot of mind and heart and soul work right after all that had happened. And that was probably the best thing that I could have ever done, was to get away and take some time and allow myself to think things through and sit under the stars and, just commune with, really with God and try to straighten this stuff out. And I was off the drugs and just trying to pull my life together. And so I've had a lot of absolutely insane, bizarre stuff happen to me. You know what I mean? Just the most bizarre circumstances, and, people say it's just like being in a war. So they are absolutely correct, you know what I mean? It's just like being in a war, with disasters and bombs going off. And the bombs in my home were, people fighting and screaming and throwing things, dishes flying, fists flying, belts flying, whatever, my parents decided to abuse us with would be flying. We'd be flying, I was slammed into walls, thrown across the room, and have a lot of neck injuries, neck damage and back damage done because of that, especially my upper neck, and my back right by my neck is quite screwed up. And, my head has had so many blows to it that, I kept thinking, one more, and that's it, that's going to be it, I'm going to be out of here. And I used to pray for that. I'd be like, oh, yes, please, one more. You put me out of my misery, please. And that's really sad, for a small child to be thinking like that. And that's exactly what this is like. It's like war. It's like being a prisoner of war, you know what I mean? Being stuck in this situation as a child, right? And it's very sad that parents would do this and not get their children some help and not get themselves some help and create this world of for their children, right? But that's what they do, and it's very, very sad. So we'll continue this article. This is quite a bit here. More, you can check this out for yourself. www.mudrashram.com, mudrashram.com, And there's lots and lots of this just left, and we haven't even hardly even begun to cover it. So if you want to check this out, please do. It's all about dysfunctional families. And thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate everybody who's taking the time to listen to my shows. I've almost done 600 shows now, and I know it's a lot of work keeping up with my shows, and even for me. So I know for the people that are tuning in, it's got to be a lot of work. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't know who all are listening. I know that Gypsy Witch, my good friend from Australia, is always here with me, and I thank you so much for being here. And I have some other people that pop in now and then in the chat room, and I just thank you all so much for being here and being part of my healing journey. And do all you can to stop child abuse. You know, if you're a parent, you create a nice, caring, stable, nurturing, healthy home for your children, right? Please do that. You know what I mean? I'm pleading with you. Please do that, because your children are counting on you to do that for them, right? Have a great night, everybody. If you need something, get a hold of me. I'll be around on the weekend. Tomorrow morning, please check out the show, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I have Kate Swift coming on the show. Kate Swift is my friend from the UK. She's a survivor. She's an author, survivor, advocate. She's got something very important that she wants to discuss, and it's a petition that's going around in the UK. And I hope everybody will tune into that show. If you can't catch it live, be sure and catch the archive. And Kate Swift is just a dear heart, and she's got a new book coming out, and it's just going to be wonderful to hear from her. So please try to catch that show if you can. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great night. And then Monday night, I have Ray Luskin coming on my show on Monday night, Child Abuse Prevention, Human Rights Abuse Prevention. We're changing the show. Ray Luskin's going to come on and talk about the issues of shame in relating to being abused as a child, right? And shame is such a huge issue. So I hope everybody will tune into that. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and take really good care of yourselves, okay? Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.